One of the most anticipated sporting events of the year is coming up, and that is, of course, the NFL draft. Now, usually when it comes to the draft, we have a clear idea of what teams are going to pick what players, right? But there's also things that we don't know, such as who's going to trade back, what surprise picks are there going to be. There's just a lot that we simply do not know, but that's what makes it exciting because every year in every NFL draft, there's always some move, some trade, whatever that just blows your mind. And like I said, that's what makes it exciting. I'm David Street, and this is Total Sports Talk. Welcome to another episode of Total Sports Talk, everybody. I'm David Street, and this is my co-host Ed Smith.
Welcome, y'all.
You may notice that Matthew is not with us. That's because he has a family matter to attend to. Nothing to worry about at all, but he just can't be with us. So the NFL draft, Ed. First of all, let's talk about teams trading back. Now, for those of you watching who don't know what that means, essentially what it means is when a team basically trades down. So to give you an example, let's say that the Patriots trade their third overall pick for in this year's draft for the 15th overall pick. Well, Ed, why the hell would a team want to do that? Why would you go from having a top three pick to a team that's not even in the top 10? What's the point in doing that?
The point is to bundle and get more for your money. Essentially, there's only so many top of the draft type players that are out there. So if you are just outside where those top of the draft players are, it's a good idea to move back, give somebody else the opportunity to move into your spot, but take away other picks that you can use to build your roster with.
So, when I'm looking at the teams that are in the top five, I think, the Bears and Commanders right now are staying put, and that's very obvious. Both those teams need quarterbacks, and they would be very dumb to trade back. But then we look at a team like the Patriots, Ed, right, where things could go either way. And the way that I look at it, one reason I could see the Patriots trading back is they don't see Jaden Daniels as the future of their franchise. To me, that's the only, or at least the biggest reason why they would do that. But what do you think, Ed? Do you think the Patriots are going to stay put and more than likely take Jaden Daniels, or do you think, like I said, they don't see Jaden as the future of their franchise and they're going to trade back to maybe get someone they feel is better, they feel fits their team better?
I think at this point, with the way things are trending, that it's always that end of the process jumble around of players. But I think Jaden Daniels is actually going to wind up in Washington with the Commanders, and you're going to see Drake May be there at the third spot. Now, for me, I would I would trade back and fill that roster because that is a depleted roster after everything that has gone down with the Patriots since Tom Brady left. So they are definitely in build mode, not necessarily that one high end player is going to put them over the top. They're in a situation where they need depth, they need effort. They need players that are hungry to be in the league. And you really get that by getting more picks at the lower end of the draft than what you do out of that one player that all the cameras are on them at all times and they're working on their PR stuff and all that. Uh, the head coach's issue going into this season is going to be how to get the players that they do have under contract to play together as a team. It isn't a matter of they already know exactly what their identity is. They know exactly who they are as a team. They are building that culture right now post Bill Belichick, which has to be different than what it was before, even though it's a Belichick disciple that took over. I think they should move back, but everybody needs a quarterback. And Drake May is going to be the best quarterback that's on the board at that time. So it would not shock me for them to stay there, although I think it's better for them to move back and basically build a foundation rather than put the star on the top of the tree.
So just so that I'm hearing you correctly, are you predicting that Jaden Daniels is going to be the second overall pick in the draft?
Yes, I am.
Wow, that's I don't want to say it's bold, but it seems kind of bold, especially because you don't seem all that high on Jaden Daniels as a player.
I'm not as high on Jaden Daniels as a player. In fact, I don't really see the quarterbacks in this class being all that great. They are not the best of the best that I've ever seen come out of college. I think there's better value at the lower end of quarterbacks that you could pick up to help build rosters with. But these stars at the top, I think there's a bit of reaching going on, including Caleb Williams, including Jaden Daniels, and including Drake May, whom I think should have stayed another year in college myself. 2 years in college does not equate to being able to run an NFL system and be a professional at this level.
Fair enough. Ed, what other teams in the draft are you looking at that could potentially trade back?
Well, if we're still looking in the top five, I'm definitely not looking at the Cardinals. They've got 6 picks in the first 3 rounds. Why would you do that? You're already got enough picks out there to bolster your roster that, quite honestly, has been depleted by a free agency and has had some lackluster picks and uh, basically building around Kyler Murray, which Kyler Murray is kind of a hard case to build around because he's had so many off-field question marks about him at this point. His talent is there. There's no question on that. The question is he in the right headspace to be that long-term star in the NFL like everybody proclaimed he would be when he came out of Oklahoma?
Yeah,
Now, as
definitely.
far as other teams that could move back, I have a longer list of teams that could be looking to move forward than moving back, like Minnesota, for example. They've got 2 first round picks. They could package those up to the Patriots and get that third pick, which gives them the opportunity to get the quarterback that they want, not the one that's left over. There's even some talk out there where JJ McCarthy could wind up being picked ahead of Drake May. I don't understand why. I don't know if anybody understands why, but it's out there. It's been talked about. In fact, I think Minnesota, if they want one of those two, I think they need to get ahead of the Giants. Uh, and that is what's going to secure a quarterback because Sam Darnold in Minnesota is not the answer long term. We all know that. So why not try and go get the quarterback in the draft that you can start to build around on a rookie contract and build the rest of the roster around him and go at least compete in what is suddenly a very competitive uh, NFC North.
Yeah, definitely. And also, I think another team to look at is the Los Angeles Chargers, who, from my understanding, they're open to trading back, but at the right price. Do we know what that price could be if they haven't said it already?
I would imagine that that price could be a second round this year and a first round next year with some possibility of supplemental picks uh, between this year to next year because Chargers are kind of in the catbird seat, if you will, in the sense that it's like somebody that owns a condo downtown and they don't really want to go anywhere because everything that they know is convenient and it's good for them. But if an investor comes in and throws the right price at them, they're willing to move out to the suburbs and make a good life out there. That's where I see the Chargers at this point, getting picks outside of the prime positions of the first round of this draft and making life very good, very well, be outside of that and bolstering the pieces around Justin Herbert with Jim Harbaugh pulling the strings at this point, as opposed to anybody else. I trust Jim Harbaugh to do that better when he knows he has the quarterback that he can win games with to start with.
Well, and I'm glad you mentioned Jim Harbaugh because like the Chargers are a very interesting team to me, man, because when I look at the team, yes, they were terrible last year, right? They were terrible on offense. They were, really, really bad on defense. But when I look at this team on paper, this is still a very talented team. And to me, the results that they gave up last year was just, I think it was just more that they gave up on Brandon Staley rather than just a lack of talent standpoint. But because clearly this team does not lack talent at all. And I just feel like, for the most part, Jim Harbaugh is going to get the best out of these guys, and he's going to turn them into at least better than what they were last year.
Definitely. And they had a lot of high priced talent on that roster last year, which they had to give up going into this season. So who's going to catch the ball for them? Who knows? But if they do move back, they can get a plethora of wide receivers to fill those spots that Justin Herbert can grow and develop while he is captaining this team.
Yeah, 100%. While we're still on this topic, about the draft and trades and whatnot, I want to get to an interesting topic, and that, of course, is draft capital, which basically, to sum it up, is essentially the value of all the picks that you've that you've gathered. But like ultimately, Ed, what is draft capital worth?
I think it's worth more to building a team in the long term rather than these all in go get it type of situations.
Kind
That's
of
the
like the
way I
Rams.
look at draft. I'm sorry.
Kind of like the Rams, and also you could argue maybe the Bucks the previous year. Although I think the Rams are probably a better example of that.
Well, and that's where just foregoing all your draft capital kind of makes sense if you're willing to put it all on the table and shove it all in for that one opportunity. If you only get one shot, just one opportunity, would you capture it or would you just let it slip? Yeah, that is what those teams did. And guess what? It worked out for them. They got their championships and they moved on with their lives. What we see with the Chiefs, though, is they're using their draft capital to plug holes in those places where free agents they can't afford the free agents to do it, but they can get good value in the players that they're bringing in. And for those players that they want to bring in and they are not in the right spot to get those free agents, they can bundle those picks that they have that are sitting out there in those later rounds, supplementals, your seventh, your sixth round picks, move up and get a player that you think can fit that hole that is left vacant by what would normally need to be filled by a free agent that quite frankly is going to be more expensive than you can handle when you have a quarterback that is on his big contract right now.
So like overall, throughout the years, and you kind of already mentioned it, but like what teams in your opinion have handled draft capital the best? Like who have been the best teams as far as handling this sort of stuff?
Well, I'm going to go with that jersey right back there, the Packers,
The Texas.
because they have really their whole philosophy from the president on down is to build the team through the draft and develop these players into what it means to be an NFL player, a Green Bay Packer, and use that to build towards success. Now, it helps that you've had two consecutive all-time quarterbacks to run your franchise for the past 30 years. I'm not denying that. But what I will say is the people that they've brought in around those two guys, they've developed them and they have consistently stayed successful over that time period. Now, if you want to look at a specific trade that of draft capital that really built a dynasty, I look no further than about 250 miles north of where I am right now, and that's the Dallas Cowboys. That dynasty in the 90s was really put in place by a single trade for a single player, which it wound up involving three teams in the end. But the players that they got picks back from Minnesota when they traded Herschel Walker to Minnesota, the picks that they got back, they turned into one of the best groups of talent coming out of college that I have seen in my life. And part of that is Jimmy Johnson had just come out of college, so he knew all the players to go get. And the other part was there was no salary cap, so they could pay whoever, whatever, and build the team however way that they wanted to at that point. So, yes, using your draft capital, building the building the dynasty, those are the two examples that come off the top of my head as to the best examples on how to use your draft capital for success. One was a little more short term, and that was more because of a dispute at the top. Jimmy Johnson, Jerry Jones getting an argument over who's actually in control of that team. Uh, and then Green Bay, whom has really used the draft as a springboard to develop players to do well in the league over time.
And certainly we can include the Chiefs in that discussion, right? After they just came off of
Oh yeah.
back-to-back Super Bowls.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's plenty of examples that are out there. Those are the two that are just closest to me and closest to my head. Uh, one being in the middle of cowboy country, and two being a Packers fan.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Well, Ed, the other thing too when it comes to the draft is that every year there's always those players who are clearly, the best of the best. They stand out, but picked as they're not picked high simply because they don't meet team needs. And when I'm looking at a player who is a value pick, I mean, to me, one guy clearly stands out, and that is Brock Bowers out of Georgia. In my opinion, you could argue that Brock Bowers is the best overall player in the draft. Top five player, but he more than likely won't be a top five pick because, I mean, for one, you look at the teams in the top five, right? Like the Bears and the Commanders, Patriots all need quarterbacks, obviously. So they're out. Then you look at the Cardinals. Who do the Cardinals need? I would say they probably need wide receiver because they were terrible at that position last year, and their defense needs to be shored up as well. But then you look at the Chargers, and I can maybe, emphasis on maybe see the Chargers taking Brock Bowers. But even then, I don't know. So what do you think?
As far as Brock Bowers goes, to the Chargers, if they stay at that number 5 pick, you're definitely going to see the Chargers go offensive line to protect their quarterback. Because as it says in the Blindside movie, uh, you pay your quarterback first, and then you pay your left tackle second. You know, so you pay the mortgage first, and you pay the insurance second. That's exactly what that looks like to me going into this draft. With Brock Bowers, I'm I'm of the opinion that there are teams that are still trying to build around perimeter offense versus middle of the field offense. So Brock Bowers is definitely going to be a middle of the field offense type of guy. And it's a matter of which team is looking that way that could use his unique skill set. Because, like we've talked about before on the show, tight ends are becoming more prevalent in the NFL, and that center of the field has become more of a target area now that the defense is adjusted to the perimeter offense and everything is shut down on the outside. Well, guess what? That leaves the middle open. So that's where the tight ends come in. I could see Brock Bowers coming in probably around 10, 11 as far as a number pick, but I think his value is much higher than that. He was the best player in college football last year. I don't care what the Heisman says or anything like that. He was the guy. And I don't know of anybody that can actually dispute that at this point. But if you're asking me who I think is going to be a great value pick, I want to give kind of a history lesson. There was a player out of LSU that was a bit of a knucklehead off the field, but one of the best players on the field.
Before you go
And
on, can I take a guess? Is it Tyrann Mathieu?
it's Tyrann Mathieu. Because of him being a knucklehead, he dropped in the draft dramatically. It all happened all at one time. So people thought taking him would be a risk. Well, at a lower round, he's not as big of a risk, but his upside when he got on the field way higher than what his downside was as being a young kid doing stupid stuff. And there's a defensive tackle out of Texas that has done some absolutely stupid stuff right now and could tumble at least 2 rounds from where he was originally projected, and that's T'Vondre Sweat. He could really be an anchor for somebody's defense for 10, 15 years. But I don't know if teams are willing to take him that high because he between the combine to the draft was arrested for DUI, and that is a huge red flag for any NFL team that's looking to invest millions of dollars into these players. So he's gonna tumble, but he's gonna be a huge value pick later in the draft. I would I would say fourth, fifth round at this point.
Well, Ed, if that does happen, one team I could see potentially takes what? The Kansas City Chiefs. Simple fact is that Andy Reid historically has shown that he gives guys second chances.
He has definitely given grace to a lot of players that have shown potential, but the culture that he builds in Kansas City, yes, they go out and do stupid things because they're young men with a lot of money, but the culture that Andy Reid takes on is one that kind of has them fall in line. It's not like the Belichick way where everybody's kind of a robot, so to speak. It's more of a family nature across the board throughout the facility. Yes, the facilities and all the ratings, if you're rating uh, the check marks of, weight rooms and lockers and daycare and cafeteria. It's all terrible in Kansas City. But you know what the best thing about that place is? It's the coach, it's the culture, it is the pedigree of winning that is there, and that puts a lot of players in line that weren't in line to begin with.
Yeah, 100%. Well, man, I want to go into a different sport. First month of baseball season isn't quite over yet, but it's getting there. And I think anybody who watches the show knows that I predicted the Los Angeles Dodgers to win 117 games. that could still technically happen. The season's not over yet. Right now, the Dodgers, they have a great offense. Mookie Betts, Shohei Ohtani, one of the best hitting duos in the league, and certainly a big reason why they're atop the NL West. But they are 12-9. They do have 9 losses, and why they have 9 losses, Ed? Well, it's really simple because their pitching has, it hasn't been that great to say the least.
Yeah, you're absolutely right on that. They're great to watch when they're at the bat, but once the pitching gets out there, it's like, hey, let's go get a Dodger dog and a beer. It may be a while.
Yeah. But I think but right now I think we're seeing that clearly. Getting Otani was the right move. I mean, obviously, Otani is the best player in the world. I mean, any team who gets that is the right move. But when we're talking about their pitching issues, Ed, I mean, this isn't. We don't think this is systemic, or we don't think this is going to be a long term thing, right? Because the Dodgers are practically synonymous with good pitching. And keep in mind, it's still early in the season, and I just do not foresee their pitching, being okay. Like, it's not the worst pitching in the league, but it is certainly not the best. But
It's no
certainly,
Colorado Rockies.
oh yeah, but certainly they can get better, right? The Dodgers, not the Rockies.
Oh, they can get a lot better. I have them projected at 109 wins. Not quite the leap that you had made, uh, but I respect it. Getting close to that record that Seattle has from 2001, it'd be fun to see that happen. I will say this though, Mookie Betts is the best thing that could happen for Otani right now because Mookie Betts has really been carrying the offense in the leadoff spot, and the entire offense hasn't had to lean on Otani to make a go of it. So, and that's a good thing because Otani, he's not as hasn't been as prolific as what Mookie Betts has, but he's getting better pitches to see because Mookie Betts is already on base, and you don't want they don't want to walk him when Betts is already on. So you're seeing, the threat of Otani also help Mookie Betts see better pitches because who wants to give in to Mookie Betts when they have to face Otani after that? It is one of the biggest conundrums, and never mind Freddie Freeman batting after Otani. That is just a murderer's row to start off of any ball game right off. So I think Mookie Betts is really been a great spark plug for the Dodger offense, and it has kind of helped Otani along with everything else that Otani's been dealing with since he started this season with the interpreter and the gambling allegations and everything having to go on with that. And then you've got Freddie Freeman, who's still Freddie Freeman. He can he can still hit for average, hit for power, hit for RBI. That dude is a stud. But the point that I'm making is the best thing for Otani and Freeman is having Mookie Betts in front of him. So that was such a huge get in the offseason, knowing that they were going to go get Otani after that.
So let me ask you: if the Dodgers if the Dodgers don't win the World Series, do they move on from Dave Roberts?
I think you have to. But I've said that for 5 years now.
That's what I'm thinking too. It feels like every year is World Series or bust. But it really feels like that this year because you don't get a player like Shohei Ohtani if you don't plan on winning the World Series, or certainly at the very least making it to the World Series. But this is a move that says World Series or bust. And yeah, I just don't see why the Dodgers should keep Dave Roberts when year after year they underperform under him. And the only year they won a World Series was that 60-game season in 2020.
Exactly. And Dave Roberts, I believe he has been a really great regular season manager. I think he gets so caught up in the analytic portion of managing the game as it stands today rather than off of feel like it was before, even when he played. He is so in tune to these analytic things. He is very quick to pull pitchers. He's very quick to pull hitters that you would think normally have a better shot at creating offense than somebody off the bench. That is not, I certainly wouldn't do that, but analytics say do that. And Dave Roberts is so handcuffed by the numbers and what the charts say and everything like that, that it comes out in the playoffs where you have to have players make plays. It comes off as him over managing a roster that's built to win World Series championships and paid like it, by the way, the highest payroll in baseball every year since the Magic Johnson group bought the team. They are paid to make plays, and Dave Roberts isn't letting him. He's letting his brain become more important than the players that go and make plays for him. And that is the problem in my mind. And that is why he should be not there anymore. And I'll say this again for the fifth season in a row.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're certainly right, Ed. And I think the problem with Dave Roberts, and it's really the problem with a lot of coaches. It's not just a Dave Roberts thing. I notice with a lot of coaches that when the playoffs come, you're right, they overthink because they're thinking, all right, we're in the playoffs. I am the captain of the ship. I am the head honcho. Like everything goes through me. But really, at the end of the day, Ed, sometimes the best way to coach or in terms of Major League Baseball manage, sometimes the best way to do that is just let your players play. You don't need to overthink. You don't need to pull a pitcher because you feel like, well, this is what the analytics say. All right, just let your players play. And it's amazing to me how so many managers, coaches just fail to grasp that concept because they're so obsessed with being the head honcho, being the captain of the ship.
Absolutely. Can you imagine Dave Roberts trying to manage Tim Wakefield or any knuckleball pitcher? My goodness. The guy wouldn't have been able to make it past three pitches before he'd be yanked for somebody else. It, that's it's just a ridiculous notion that you're not letting your players that are some of the best players in the world at their position, not letting them do their job. And it's it's asinine to me when people in positions of power and management and things of that sort don't let the people that work for them do what they need to do when they know what needs to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's move over to the AL side of things, and let's talk about one of the best, if not arguably the best, new addition for our team, and that is Juan Soto of the Yankees, who has been on fire so far. And the Yankees last year were atrocious offensively, god awful, and certainly, that was certainly a huge reason, the biggest reason why they went and got a guy like Juan Soto. And oh, look at that, it's working out great for them, isn't it, Ed?
It's working out tremendously. And this is going to be a bit of a hot take here, but there's a good opportunity for Juan Soto and Aaron Judge to wind up 1-2 in the AL MVP race. It's it's bound to happen. There's going to be a lot of votes that are just going to go back and forth between those two guys. And really, that's going to be the only way that that team is going to be uh, carried all the way past the Orioles in the AL East, because the pitching, they'll have some surprises along the way, but I don't know if it's going to stay as consistent to uh, to overtake that core of Orioles, that Orioles roster, and show them what kids they are by being the longtime professionals that Juan Soto and Aaron Judge have been.
So it is early. We're not even past the first month of April yet, Ed, as we've talked about before. But
Uh-huh.
as of right now, is Juan Soto the favorite for AL MVP as of right now?
I think he has to be, right? I mean, he's been a big cog that's been shoved into the Yankees lineup, and all of a sudden they're good again. Just as one guy. I mean, that's isn't that the definition of most valuable player? I it it just drives me up a wall when that award becomes most outstanding player and not most valuable player. Right now, Juan Soto is the most valuable player in the AL, and it there's some other guys out there that are really flashing, but so far the most consistent uh, high end play that I've seen has been Juan Soto. I mean, the guy's at a 352 average, 478, 577, 1.055 as a slash line. That is tremendous to start the season. He's got 4 home runs, 17 RBIs, and that's all in front of the big man, Aaron Aaron Judge behind him. So, and Aaron Judge is struggling, but pitchers still are not wanting to pitch to him. So that means that Juan Soto is seeing better pitches, being in that spot in the order. It really is. Uh, but let me ask you this, David. Between Betts leading off for the Dodgers and Soto leading off for the Yankees, which do you think is going to sustain that success throughout the season, above the other?
Oh, good question. Um, ah, off my gut, I'm just gonna go with Mookie Betts just because I think he's more proven as a player. But that's certainly not a knock against Juan Soto at all.
Yeah, I certainly understand that point of it. It's just a matter of when we're looking at things in this short a time in the season, there are very few storylines to follow other than who can sustain the success that they see in the first month. And we're talking Betts and Juan Soto. Which one is going to do it, and is it sustainable for both of them? And I think it is. I think it's sustainable for both of them, just like it's sustainable for some other teams to be absolutely horrendous as a Major League Baseball club throughout the season. You know, and they're out there, right, David?
Yeah, they are. In fact, listen, elephant in the room. We're talking about the White Sox, folks. Right, Ed?
Absolutely.
If you want to, if you guys listen, I knew the White Sox were a terrible team, but after digging into the numbers, I had no idea just how terrible they were. And I got some numbers to read to you. Okay, the Red Sox. Why do I keep saying Red Sox? The White Sox are by far the worst team in the majors. Right, pitching bottom 10 in terms of ERA. All right, they are one of only two teams with a below 200 batting average. All right, they're quite literally the worst team in terms of winning percentage, wins. They have the worst run differential by 20. Andrew Vaughn, who leads the team in at bats, has the following numbers: a 159 batting average, no home runs, and 3 RBIs. But you know something, Ed? As embarrassing as these statistics are, Ed, I think you have a piece of valuable information that makes this all even more embarrassing.
Ooh, you know, with Major League Baseball being a salary driven league, yes, they have their luxury taxes. It's not necessarily a hard salary cap, if you will. And with each team getting about $120 million as far as revenue share from the MLB, the Chicago White Sox are spending 126 million on their roster. Now, why is that significant? Well, every other team in their division spends less than that. Every other team in the AL Central spends less than $126 million to be way better than a 3-15 mark this early in the season with a negative 54 run differential through 18 games. And these are numbers going into Friday. So that is a horrific stat as if you're a White Sox fan that you have spent that much money for absolutely nothing. It's like going to McDonald's and you know expecting to paying Red Lobster prices to go to McDonald's.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous. And just by comparison, the Oakland A's roster is only costing them 68 million, and yet they are 8-11 with only a negative 22 run differential.
Which that is still a losing record, but anybody who knows about the circumstances, the crappy circumstances that the A's are dealing with, can be impressed, just by the fact that their record is not worse.
Yes, absolutely. And when you're looking at the differences between the two teams, David, you had brought up the fact that the White Sox are less than 200 batting average.
Hmm.
Sure, the Oakland A's are batting just over the 200, the Mendoza line, but the fact that the Oakland A's have more than 3/4 of a ERA differential in the positive. The A's going into today were at 3.72. The White Sox were at 4.4. It's ridiculous to have a team that is half the cost playing better than you are. I would be embarrassed to be a White Sox player, and much less I feel bad for the White Sox fans out there. They deserve better than this.
Yeah, 100%. And I want to take a little bit of this time to give a shout out to the A's because yes, they still have a losing record at the end of the day. Yes, their offense is terrible, and yes, they have a negative run differential. But they do have a top 10 ERA. As you said, Ed, about a 3.7 ERA, and that is obviously the biggest reason why their record isn't worse. But I also mentioned before that they're dealing with crappy circumstances right now. Okay, everybody knows that they're going to move to Vegas eventually after they play some time in Sacramento. But distractions like that can really affect how you perform, Ed. And just to kind of go to a different sport, but the same concept applies, right? The Arizona Coyotes, the now inactive Arizona Coyotes, as they're going to move to Salt Lake City, Utah, right? There was a point during the season, Ed, where the Coyotes actually had a decent record, and it looked like, hey, you know what? This team could be a surprise team. But then they went on like a 13, 14, maybe 15 game losing streak. And turns out, from my understanding, that whole losing streak started when the Coyotes players started to hear murmurs of the team officially leaving the Phoenix area and going to Salt Lake City. So when you have distractions like that, when you have really big distractions like that, it can affect how you perform. It can affect you mentally, Ed. And the fact that the Oakland A's players, from what we've seen so far, have not been affected that much. I mean, kudos to and I'm gonna feel awful for saying this because I can't remember his name. I'm drawing a blank. But kudos to the Oakland A's manager for the job that he's done so far.
Yeah, he just took over for Billy Beane, after however many years he was there.
Yeah,
Uh,
who? Who is it? I feel like it's a guy that I know. Not
I
Bob.
don't have it off the top of my head either. Uh, just because I try not to think about the Oakland A's as much as I can.
No offense,
Uh,
A's fans, but I don't think you
uh,
can blame us.
but there are murmurs around the Chicago White Sox about them moving. Is that part of what could be getting into the players' heads about really putting in the effort for an organization that's not going to be there for very much longer? There's still questions about that because keep in mind the White Sox were the last team to get a new stadium before the whole Camden Yards blueprint took shape. They were the last team to get a new stadium that had that multi-purpose feel to it, like was built in the 70s. Very vanilla, very congruent all the way across, very even. Not a whole lot of character as far as dimensions of the walls and how they change shape and all this other stuff. So they've been at odds with the city of Chicago for their stadium. We all know about the Bears stadium situation
I
that
was
they're
about to
fighting as
say,
well. And guess which team Chicago really wants to keep around more? It's the Bears.
yep.
So the idea that the Chicago White Sox could eventually be on the market to move to another location, it's been floated out there. We haven't seen anything come of it yet, but if that type of conversation is being had within the locker room from management down to the clubhouse onto the field, it can lead to a lot of players not putting in the effort that it takes to be a successful franchise. And quite honestly, I think that might be part of what we're seeing here.
Well, not only that, Ed, but another reason why we could potentially see the White Sox get out of there is because the city of Chicago has another team that is much, 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 much better, has been far more successful within the past 10 years or so. So it's like, why do we need you, White Sox, when we have the Cubs, a obviously much better baseball team?
Well, I as far as history goes, I don't know of better baseball team, but a much more beloved by the citizens of Chicago
Yeah,
baseball
definitely.
team over time. Yes, the White Sox more than 100 years ago had the whole Black Sox scandal, and they didn't win another world championship until 2005 against the Astros. We all know that story. But the Cubs, even though that they did not win their championship until 2016, they are the defining club of the city of Chicago. Their stadium, Wrigley Field, as old as it is still the defining stadium for baseball in the city of Chicago. This whole thing with the Chicago White Sox, it's being they're being played second fiddle to every other organization that's in that town, and they may just be tired of it. I I would be at some point because if you look at the other teams that are in the city of Chicago, you've got the Bears, you've got the Blackhawks, you've got the Bulls, you've got the Cubs. I mean, where even the Chicago Fire, where do the White Sox get their fan base from? It's almost like they have to share a fan base for them to have one. And that's not fair to that organization whatsoever.
Well, I tell you what, man, when the White Sox won the World Series in 2005, I hope the fans at that time, didn't take anything for granted because that team was insane. They quote unquote only won 99 games, and the only reason why I say they only won 99 games is because I think anybody who watched that team, we all know they could have won a lot more than that. They just kind of, went on cruise control at the end of the season. But that team was just absolutely insane. So if you're a White Sox fan and you watch that team, I hope you didn't take it for granted because I'm not saying that you're never going to see your team win a World Series again, but it is going to take a while. I'm sorry to tell you that, but I think you know that deep down.
Yeah. and there you can bet on it.
Yeah.
In Texas, not so much. And I only bring that up because they beat the Astros in that World Series.
Yeah, they went 11-1. I mean, I don't think any team had a chance. But while we are talking about other teams, Ed, what other teams in the MLB right now stick out to you as far as how good they are or how bad they are so far?
As far as teams that stick out as far as how bad they are, the Marlins. But
Oh yeah,
I feel
they're
like that's a yearly conversation, year after year after year,
although
because
they did kind of randomly make the playoffs last year, but
they
yeah,
did. And what did they do as a thank you? They did what they do every time they go into a playoff run. They sell off everything that's good about them, and that's just the history of that franchise. Back when they were the Florida Marlins, playing in Joe Robbie Stadium, to the Miami Marlins, playing with that big thing. I can't even just give it a name out
yeah,
there in left field. And here's how bad the Marlins franchise has been over the past 6 years. The home run leader over the last 6 years for the Miami Marlins is Giancarlo Stanton.
yeah,
That and that was his last year that he was there. That's how terrible this has been for them. But that's on the East Coast. On the West Coast, the Angels, they're a bit surprising right now, but they're still so reliant on one of the best players that we've seen that I don't think we'll ever see the light of championship, and that's Mike Trout. I I kind of feel bad for him because he is on pace to have mid 50s home runs, but only like 80 RBIs. That is, nobody can do anything around him. And it's a shame to see that much talent be wasted in an organization that really has not proven to be really serious about being a successful franchise since they won the World Series, all those years ago.
yeah. Well, when I look at Mike Trout, Ed, I mean, what's the best way for me to say this? We know that players have the ability to get traded because they can march to the front office and they can say, "Hey, I want to be traded." I think from our understanding, Mike Trout has not asked for that. But does he just is he content with where he's at right now? Does he? Yeah, I mean that's the best what I can
Sadly,
ask for.
yes.
Yeah,
Sadly, yes. I think Mickey Mouse has some pictures of him, hidden away somewhere. Something to keep him there. I, I, for the old seam heads that may be out there, the comp that I make is for Mike Trout is Andre Dawson. And the reason why I bring up the Hawk is he was the only MVP winner for a last place team. And I feel like that is Mike Trout every season, being a part of the Angels.
yeah. Well, certainly I do feel bad for Mike Trout in the sense that like year after year, after year, he shines and in a puddle of turds. But what I really want to see from Mike Trout is I think what we're going to see from him, Ed, actually is I think toward the tail end of his career when he's no longer as viable to the Angels and it's obvious that they no longer require his services. Trade him to a World Series contending team and let him go out on top with a World Series ring because it would be a crime against humanity if one of the best players in Major League Baseball history, one of the best players that we've seen in this generation, retires without a ring.
100%. Send him across town with Otani and see what the Dodgers do with him as opposed to what the Angels did with him.
Yeah, well,
You'll definitely see a difference there.
yeah, well, if the Dodgers have Shohei and Trout, and they have Dave Roberts, and they still can't do anything, then come on, like what the hell are we doing, man?
Just fire Dave Roberts into the sun at that point.
Ugh,
That's about as bad as it gets. As
I
far as
know.
a team that I'd be looking at to keep an eye on going through this season on the positive side, that's a bit surprising to me. It's Milwaukee. They
Really?
may not
I feel like Milwaukee's good every year, though.
they're good every year, but have they been the team to make the deep run? And that's where I'm kind of at right now. Keep in mind that NL Central is a division in which all but one of their teams has a positive run differential, and they're leading that division. So they are outplaying the good play around them, and that is something to keep an eye on, in my opinion, because if they have a difficult stretch getting to the playoffs, that'll battle test them to make a deeper run rather than these one and done series, just stepping aside for teams like the Dodgers.
True. And then I'll add my 2 cents here. If I'm looking at a team that's kind of a surprise, but also at the same time not really a surprise, I'm looking at the Rays. Now, me saying that the Rays are a surprise might be, well, surprising because they're good every year. But if you look at the team this year, Ed, I mean, we have a negative 17 run differential, which is tied for the worst in the AL East. Like, we should be a losing team, and yet we're 11-9. So, I mean, but but the Rays are interesting, man, because and I'm gonna go on a little rant here about Kevin Cash. I think I think for the most part, Kevin Cash has done a phenomenal job, at least in the regular season. But much like Dave Roberts, for whatever reason, he just falls apart in the playoffs. But in fairness, I think certainly Kevin Cash has more of an excuse because look at the budget of the team that he's managing versus the budget of the
Mhm.
team that Dave Roberts is
Mhm.
managing. I mean, it's nothing more to be said
And,
than that.
and I will definitely give the Rays credit. They know who they are, they know what they are, and they know how to get the most out of who and what they are.
Yeah, definitely. Um, well, folks, that's just about all the time that we have. Thank you so much again for tuning into another episode of Total Sports Talk. But until then, we are rounding third and headed for home.